We've put a few paths in here because I like to ramble in here, and we get to the plants. You can see some plants are dominant and then some start to recede. When you look at here, this is our Alleghany Pachysandra, and I just put a few plants in. It's thriving and it's starting to move around the garden now. In the spring, this plant is fantastic with the flowers, very fragrant, quite lovely. And then in the back here, you'll see there's a little grouping here, it's growing, of Bottlebrush Grass. And that's coming in very nicely, and I think it's, you know, it gives a little height to that area. And also in another month or so, when those inflorescents pop out, it's just going to be lit in the white of that grass. I'm going to come in and talk about some tools and techniques of how I built this garden and how others also approach this type of work. And we'll do that after we sort of walk through the garden here. So there are viburnums in here. There are lots of ferns. You can see now I've got another whole section of Pachysandra coming in. Over here, you'll see a lovely little patch of wild ginger. I did not plant it there. It actually was on the other side of the garden and thrived for a few years, and then it sort of declined and it popped right up here. So it's really fun. Every year I watch something else happen. In the spring, the garden is filled with bluebells, completely filled. So it's just, and then the woodland poppies come up, then the ferns come up. So every week something's coming. It's a living environment, which we enjoy intensely. One of the things I do want to say though about the river birch, and here we'll look at how rough, we can look at the difference. You can see how the curling of the tree is much tighter. You can look over here at this one, and maybe this is a better view here, BJ, this tree. But you can see how the shredding of the bark is much tighter, and I'm going to posit that it hosts many more insects in that bark. It's really a terrific habitat. And how do I know that? Well, one of the delights of this that I did not know was going to happen is every spring, I know when spring's actually here, these limbs are filled, these trunks are filled with creepers and other birds that are just going up and down the trees for at least a week, hunting all the insects that are now coming out from the winter. I know spring is here. I just wait for the birds. And that's one of those things I did not know was going to happen. It's a delight, and of course we've increased the habitat and the nutritional value for those nestlings immensely. Okay, so we'll just sort of walk through the garden, look at some of the plants that are in here and how cool, and you can look through the garden. Now I have a sense of depth with some of the plants that are now starting to mature. I don't see the whole garden at once, which is what I want. I want some sense of depth and movement and mystery, really. And so that's what's happening here. We have some lovely doll's eyes, which are coming in right now. And that's really fun. Now you can find this plant right up in rocky ledges in West Virginia, up in the mountains. And it loves this garden site as well. And every year I see another stem coming up, so it's really starting to come out. And maybe I should talk a little bit about regeneration in this garden. And what do I mean by that? I mean the garden starts to replicate itself. And we have river birch, we have redbud, we have dogwood, we have eastern hop hornbeam in here, oaks, and of course a maple. And what I'm seeing now every year are seedlings. I did not plant those, but if you walk over here in the garden, I have a very lovely little oak that's coming up here. Now this is telling me this garden is healthy. It's also telling me probably dogs live here and or I spray it occasionally, because otherwise this is, you know, deer are going to go right for this. And I do that. I come out once a month and I just touch a few plants. And also I've had rambunctious dogs who, you know, give deer a sense of being prey and not just at a buffet. So that's the difference there. But you can see there's a little redbud down here that's coming up. So I put these little green stakes. I try to hold them on there, but also it just clues me in and it's not too obnoxious. in here. And that's coming up all over this garden. So I'm just out here now, and after this video I'll come out and mark many more. So I have quite a few seedlings. Now, some folks will think, you know, in traditional gardening, well, you don't want to put them that close together. You know, have an oak and a redbud growing together. But you know what? That's how Mother Nature does it. And these trees will serve as the next level in that stratification hierarchy. They will grow up and provide us, right now they're ground layer, then they're going to come up and give us that shrub layer, then they're going to come up and give us that under canopy tree layer, and then eventually, if any of these trees, of course, they're going to hit their, you know, their end of their lives and come down, and these guys will spring right up because their roots will be for a larger tree. They're just growing and waiting. They're growing and waiting, right? And then they'll come up. On the other hand, you could also say, well, they've gone to a certain height, a certain place, it's not working for me, and you edit it out. Maybe you just cut it and let it be a snag, which is a very important element in a woodland, or you take it out. So this is a different approach than putting every plant equidistant in a certain pattern. We're letting nature create our own pattern here. So I like to say gardens like this really create the opportunity for life. And then, you know, we try to be good stewards to shepherd that along, but also to come out and watch what happens and maybe replicate that in another situation. So that's what's happening through here. And every year, like I said, something's dominant. This year we have some meadow rue, which was out in the meadow, but now it's in the woodland. And it seems to love it here. So I'm going to let it run. And there's nothing like seeing those tassels, those golden tassels come out on this plant. So that's what's going to happen here. Over here, I have some Appalachian Sedge, which is doing very well. It took 2 years to really become robust like this, and now I just love it. But here's one of the things that happens, right, in a woodland. Different plants have different times to grow, or they're becoming dominant, and you can see here's a white wood aster in here, which I love, and there's plenty of it, but it's in a place I don't want, right? So I'm just going to pop it out. Now you can see how easy that happened. And why is that so easy? Well, we had some rain last night, but I also have this wonderful, wonderful leaf litter here, which if you're, you know, if you are following Dr. Talamay, he has all kinds of fabulous things to tell you the function of that for nutrition, for nestlings, and of course other things. But I keep my leaves. This garden, this landscape, nothing leaves this property, anything that's growing, nothing.